Hey, everybody, and welcome back to MetaCast. I'm John,
I'm Maya.
and we're going to be diving into some pretty interesting movie news today.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, Sony has been trying to make like a whole cinematic universe,
Huh.
but they're
Yeah.
only using Spider-Man villains.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're looking at this article from Tomatazos,
Okay.
and it's this Spanish-language movie news site.
Cool.
And it looks like Sony's big experiment might be coming to an end.
Oh, wow.
So this whole thing started back in 2018
Mm-hmm.
with Venom, which
I
actually
was gonna say.
did really well
Yeah, it was a huge success.
at the box office.
Yeah.
But then things kind of went downhill from there.
Oh, no.
Tomatazos is saying that they got their information from the Wrap,
Okay.
and they both seem to think that this whole villain universe is on its last legs.
Interesting.
So Kraven the Hunter is coming out soon,
Right.
but it sounds like it might be the final nail in the coffin.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like the end of this.
Yeah. So what went wrong? Was this whole villain universe just a bad idea from the start?
Well, I mean, shared universes are hard to do.
Yeah.
You need like a really strong overarching story.
Right?
You need really compelling characters.
Mm-hmm.
And you need like quality across the board.
Yeah.
Venom was a huge hit, like we said.
Yeah.
But then the movies that came after it, like Morbius and Madam Web,
Yeah, those were not great.
they really struggled.
Morbius was so bad.
Oh my gosh, it was...
It became a meme online.
It was so memeable.
Yeah, like the plot was all over the place.
Totally.
And the script was just weak.
Yeah.
And then Madam Web.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a pretty good cast.
It did. It had a really star-studded cast.
But it only made like $52 million globally
Yeah.
on opening weekend.
Not a great start.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So is it just like a quality issue, or was the whole idea just flawed?
I mean, it's probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
Superhero fatigue is definitely a thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Audiences are getting more picky about which comic book movies they want to see.
Right.
And also, let's be honest, Spider-Man villains, while they're interesting,
Mm.
they don't have the same, like, name recognition
Right.
as, like, the Avengers
Yeah, that's true.
or some of the other big Marvel characters.
So maybe leaning so hard on the villains wasn't the best move?
It was a gamble, for sure.
Yeah.
And it seems like it might not have paid off,
Yeah,
but they're not giving up entirely.
Okay.
They still have a lot of Spider-Man projects in the works,
they do.
but it seems like they're shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah, Tomatazos is saying that Sony is going to focus more on projects that are like directly tied to Spider-Man himself,
Right.
like Tom Holland's fourth Spider-Man film.
Yes.
And Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
That's probably a safer bet.
for sure.
Those are going to do well.
Absolutely.
They've got that built-in audience,
Mhm.
and they've already proven to be successful,
Exactly.
both critically and commercially.
Yeah, and it allows them to like explore different parts of the Spider-Man story
Right.
without having to worry about fitting everything into this one big narrative.
Yeah.
And they also have Spider-Man Noir,
Oh, yeah.
which is a TV series
Yeah.
starring Nicolas Cage.
That one's going to be interesting.
It's set in the 1930s.
Yeah, like a noir version of Spider-Man.
Yeah, so that could be really cool.
Cage as like a gritty Depression-era Spider-Man.
I know.
I'm kind of curious to see how that turns out.
Me too.
But what about this whole Kraven situation? Is
Yeah.
there any hope for this movie?
Well, Tomatazos quotes this industry analyst, Paul Derger-Bedian from ComScore,
Okay.
and he thinks that the December release date might actually help Kraven stand out
Interesting.
because there's not as much competition
Ah.
with other superhero movies.
Right.
And, you know, it's the holiday season.
So people are looking for things to do?
Exactly. That's a good point. But they also mentioned that Kraven had a pretty low-key presentation
Yeah, I heard about that.
at Brazil's Comic-Con Experience.
Yeah.
It's also known as CCXP.
Right. Not exactly generating a ton of buzz.
Yeah, it wasn't the biggest event.
And with superhero fatigue being what it is,
Yeah.
some analysts are not optimistic.
I mean, it makes sense.
So it sounds like things are pretty uncertain
Yeah.
for Kraven
Mm-hmm.
and maybe for this whole Spider-Man villain universe.
It's hard to say for sure.
So what does this mean for Sony's plans moving forward?
Yeah.
And for other studios that are trying to
Right.
replicate the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, are audiences even still interested in these big
Yeah.
interconnected universes?
Mhm.
Or are they looking for something different?
Something smaller.
Yeah, maybe this whole situation with Sony
Yeah.
is a sign that studios need to rethink their approach.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point.
Okay, this is where things start to get really interesting.
Spider-Man plans.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to see how it's all played out.
They've had some big wins, but also some pretty big flops.
Yeah, it's been a real roller coaster ride.
But it seems like they're starting to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, it seems like they're realizing that, quality is more important than quantity.
Especially when you're trying to build these big cinematic universes.
Exactly.
Like, it's not just about, like, throwing a bunch of characters together.
Right, you gotta have good stories.
You need good stories.
Good characters.
And they're not afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
Like that Spider-Man noir series with Nicolas Cage.
That's gonna be so interesting.
A pretty bold move.
It is.
But at least it shows that they're not just, like, sticking to the same old formula.
Right. They're willing to experiment a little bit.
So do you think focusing on these, like, standalone stories,
Yeah.
like Spider-Man noir,
Mm-hmm.
or even Tom Holland's next Spider-Man film,
Yeah.
like, is that the way to go?
I mean, it could be.
Okay.
Because it lets them tell these more, like, focused stories
Right.
that are really character-driven.
And they don't have to worry about, like,
Yeah.
fitting everything into this one big overarching narrative.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what audiences are actually looking for these days.
Yeah, maybe people are a little tired of the huge,
Right.
overblown spectacles.
They just want something a little bit more,
Intimate,
yeah.
more personal, like
Yeah.
well-crafted stories.
Yeah.
Instead of just these massive, like, CGI fests.
Right.
So it's all about finding that right balance
Hmm.
between familiarity
Yeah.
and innovation.
Right.
You got to give the audience something they recognize, but you also got to give them something new and exciting.
So what's the big lesson here?
Mm.
What is Sony learning?
I think they're learning that less can be more.
Oh,
They're stepping back from this idea of, like,
yeah.
a villain-centric universe,
Mhm.
and they're refocusing on what they know works.
Which is Spider-Man.
Exactly.
And maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Not just for Sony, but for the superhero genre as a whole.
I think so too.
Like, maybe it's time for studios to, like, take a breath
Right.
and really think about what
Yeah.
stories they want to tell.
Instead of just chasing the next big franchise.
Because not every character needs a cinematic universe.
Exactly.
Like, sometimes it's okay to just tell a good story
Right.
with a compelling character.
And, maybe that's all audiences really want.
So is this the beginning of the end for these big cinematic universes?
I mean, it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's a sign that studios need to be more careful,
Okay.
more deliberate.
About how they approach these projects.
Exactly.
Like, they can't just rely on the novelty of
Well,
an interconnected world
they have to actually offer something.
that resonates with audiences.
Yeah, something special.
So is Sony's decision to go back to Spider-Man himself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that a sign of things to come?
It could be.
Are we going to see other studios, like, scale back their ambitions
Maybe.
and focus on more, like, contained stories?
It's possible.
And what does this mean for the future of superhero movies in general? Well, we've certainly learned a lot today about Sony Spider-Man and the future of superhero movies.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up here. Thanks for joining us on MetaCast.
Until next time.